I think, so often, especially when we have young kids in our home, but I don't know, I feel like maybe not just young kids, maybe older kids too. There is this tension between maybe abilities that we have, gifting that we have, and the actual capacity, which there's so many different categories for capacity. It's physical, emotional, relational, financial,
social.
Yeah. So I think sometimes our ability and our capacity, due to all the things going on in our lives, the kids we have in our home, the job we have, the finances we have, maybe our ability exceeds what our actual capacity for accomplishing those things are. And what do we do with that when maybe we're capable of doing X, Y, and Z, but we have all these other factors that if we were to do it just in our ability, we would not actually be able to love the people well that are in our home, or be a kind, peaceful presence, or be connected to the Father. So I think we need to just talk about that tension, because I think we all feel that a lot of the time. I know I feel that even with what we do, of feeling like there's a part of me that would love to be writing more and just studying more and teaching more, but then I have this real life and 4 kids at home.
You're talking about in regards to intentional, you wish you could be, totally. Yeah.
So I would like to be able to grow my abilities, but my capacity sometimes limits my ability to do that right now.
Yes.
So it's always a tension, I feel like.
Yeah, well, that's because I'm the one that's always ringing the bell with Elizabeth, because you are so gifted and you do have so much to offer. But to take the long view, because right now you have a 14-year-old, an 11-year-old, a 7-year-old, and a 5-year-old. And the greatest thing you'll ever do is what you're doing with those kids and pouring into them and what they're going to then bring to the world and what their kids might bring to the world. And so if we pull you away from them and load you up with so many things that you're capable of, we might pull you away from something that you're called to. And so I think when we talk about capability and capacity, we need to talk about calling too. Obviously if you have 4 kids, you are called to shape those kids and to bring them up in the way of Jesus. And that's going to be a huge chunk of your calling. And then God's going to give you the capability to do what he's called you to do. So anyway, I'm sure we'll be getting into a lot of this, but I'm always the one that say, let's don't ask too much of Elizabeth, even though she's very capable.
I think that's the interesting thing, and this is the tension, is that some people are more capable than they have capacity for, and some people have more capacity than they're capable for.
So you had we have a definition of capacity. I think is a good one to help us talk about. Wrap our heads around that.
Are you talking about the one that has to do with giving out of abundance? Capacity?
Yes.
So capacity has to do with giving out of abundance. And capability is ability without regard for capacity.
Right.
So let's talk about that, because I see with you, sweetheart, that you are very capable. We've talked it's problematic how capable you are, because you can push yourself so hard. You can almost turn off feelings, emotions. I have a handful of friends like this too. And in one sense, it's a superpower. It's also, in another sense, really detrimental to their own health, their own lots of different factors.
Well, because when I lean too much into that, then I lose capacity for the relationships in front of me.
Yes.
So there's a cost to that in this season of when I push hard like that. I can't do both at the same time very well.
Yes.
Not for very long anyway. Of have the margin to, so much of parenting is just responding. We have to have the margin to be able to respond in a calm, regulated way. And when I'm pushing, and then my youngest throws a temper tantrum, there's no margin there for me to slow down enough to be able to be present to her and see what it is she actually needs.
Yeah.
And
you said earlier, Diane, slowing down to the pace of love, the pace of Jesus.
Right.
Oftentimes, I know, especially when there's so many moving parts, it's not even just capacity for us right now. It's it's all the different variables. And now that there is officially 19 people in the Comer family.
Us too.
There's a lot of moving parts. You know, you
There
just think
are.
of our family. That's a lot of moving parts. But you also have John Mark and Tammy, Steve and Rebecca, Matthew and Simo. And then they all have kids, which that's new as of last year. So
That's right.
it's a really interesting
And
new
their
dynamic.
needs change, and opportunity changes.
Yes.
For us to be able to be building into the next generation. I don't want to be so busy doing all these other things for other parents and other grandparents that I'm not present to and continuing on those relationships with my grandkids, because I'm very aware that there's a kind of a special niche that a grandparent can play in their grandkids' lives in supporting what their parents are saying, but saying it in a completely different way, or just, giving them some encouragement along the lines that their parents are needing to correct. That takes time. 19 people take a lot of time.
A lot of time.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of also some of our worst moments come when we haven't honored our capacities.
Yes.
So when we say, no, I can do another thing, or no, I can do that and this and this and this, and we're not actually in tune to our own capacity, that's when I can say this personally, and I think that I'm not alone. The moments when I'm short, when I'm angry, when the worst parenting moments, the worst moments as a husband, it's always when it's all just too much and I haven't honored.
You haven't taken a breath.
Yeah. And I think there's, and again, capacity is another, there's that whole other underlying thing of, there's also hurry, John Mark talks obviously a bunch about that, but there's that piece in there too.
Yeah.
There's so many different things that play into our ability to have the right capacity to be present to Jesus, to be present to our kids, to be present to our spouse. And so I want to kind of talk about that from a biblical perspective. Phil, I see you have your hand in a verse. I see Elizabeth does too. Ladies
Who's
first.
gonna get to go first?
Why don't you go first? Because I think yours sets up this next part really well. And then Phil, I know you'll have I know that if this verse doesn't hit, you'll have 4 other verses.
3.
Three. So, but yeah, why don't you share that? Because I think that was really helpful with setting the foundation of what we're trying to actually accomplish and what we're trying to move towards.
Yeah. Well, I think before I read it, as you were talking, I think
again, before I even get into it, let me just say something.
No, I have an addition to what you were saying.
I'm teasing.
I think what we're talking about, I'm just verbally processing here, requires a lot of self-awareness of how God has wired you, how he's gifted you versus how he hasn't. I think we almost need more of an awareness of what our weaknesses are or the areas that are just not our gifting, what's not ours to do. But 1 Peter 4, starting in verse 8, actually, when we talk about loving others, it says, above all, love each other deeply because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. How often do we get grumbly when we're working outside of our capacity? And we just need to be hospitable to our own family. And we're grumbling about it. And then this is the verse 10. Each of you should use whatever gifts you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in various forms. I love that. And then further on in verse 11, if anyone serves, they should do so with the strength God provides, so that in all things God may be praised through Christ Jesus. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. And just that idea that we are supposed to use the gifts God has given us, which implies we don't all have all of the gifts. We have specific gifts given to God for us for him to be glorified, for us to use those, which first infers we have to know what those things are. And I think a lot of your younger years are figuring out, how has God wired me? What are my specific gifts?
And what are not? What are not your gifts?
What are you never going to be good at?
That maybe even comes first.
Yeah.
You realize, oh, this is not a gift of mine.
Because when we're operating out of the gifts he's given us, then we can lean into the strength he provides for us to actually be able to do those things. But then I love the end because the whole point is so that he would be glorified. Not that we would be glorified, not that our kids would thank us, not that people would think we're amazing, but so that his kingdom would be
Right.
Let's bring that to like a practical level, right? Because I think all of us in this, one of the things we do is we study not only our spouses and each other, but all of us are in tune with, especially as we're on a team and we have all these different familial dynamics, but working dynamics. We're in tune to like, there's a certain things that we should never ask Diane to do. And then there's certain things that you should only do, and you should be the only person on the team to do it. Right. So it's also understanding like what is yours to give. And I would just love to bring a little practical, like it would be fun to just kind of highlight some of those things, like, like between us. Right. So like Diane's an incredible writer. She can write anything that we have written. Everything goes through Diane. We're always like, look at this, read this, make this better.
And it lights me up. I mean, to me, that doesn't feel like work. That feels like, oh, I get to sit down and do this. So we work.
You do become abnormly giddy about it.
I do. I do.
Good. It's good. I mean,
study is the same thing.
You come alive. Like it's a part of you. It's like, that's yours. That's one of your things that we give. But when it comes to like a big, like a project management of a task,
that's not just assign. Give me a task, not a project.
I don't think it's just like, we wouldn't do that because that's just not necessary. That's on the work front, right? But that's just not where your mind or you sit.
Anything administrative. Or, I'm tidy, but not organized.
Yeah.
So don't ask me to organize an event
But even you saying that, I think there's a lesson in that, like getting to know who you are, and then with Jesus helping him helping you accept who you are. Maybe is a different way to say it.
At the same time, being aware that in life, you can't just do all your favorite things all the time. We're called on to manage a project. Thanksgiving this last year was a big project for me to manage. Pushed me past my capacity, so I wasn't having very much fun. But it's just what you do in life sometimes. Now, next year, I'm not going to make a turkey. I've said that so many times. The turkey is just a mess on Thanksgiving. So anyway, the idea is you can't just say, well, I'm only going to do what I love to do, what fills my bucket, what lights me up. I mean, I love a nice clean house. That means I have to clean the bathrooms. I don't love to clean the bathrooms.
Sure.
So that's normal. So it's like when we talk about capacity, we aren't just saying that we have to always be in our sweet spot.